Good evening. My name is Joe Bandel and I am the last Rosicrucian. Tonight we're going to do Oak Advantage number 18, Benefits and Pleasures from Romantic Love. Now, this whole concept of romantic love, I think we need to talk about it a little bit, share things. And I can only speak from personal experience, and my personal experience, how would I say this? Well, okay, I just say everybody's gotta experience. They've got to go down this road their own way. But I can say what I have learned, and some of these things are metaphysical, occult principles, and I have spoken or written about quite a bit of this in the past. But in terms of this, the first thing I want to say is um, there's there needs to be a spark between two people, and that spark allows a portion of the soul. Specifically, it allows an astral body to grow in both people as these two people uh, exchange energy. Now, I know this is not politically correct, but I'm going to come out and say it. A person with an XY chromosome, which would be a male, they generate a different type of energy than a female who has an XX chromosome. It's two types of chromosomes, so it's two types of energy that's being direct generated. The thing is that the soul, for the development of the soul or each astral body, requires a balance of male energy and female energy, which means we need to get the opposite sex energy somehow from somebody else. And the way that we get that energy can come from very strange ways. It can come through family members. Our parents, for example, there's a strong connection. In other words, it's an energy connection. It's a bond that is important, that helps us to grow and build. But it also, there's a catalyst, there's a spark, and there's a growth, and then it's done. And that's what most people recognize in the sense of falling in love. Then the spark's gone, and then something else happens. Uh, there's no more spark. They have to find, if they are going to stay together, they need to find another way of staying together. But in my experience, each astral body requires a different type, well, it requires energy from a different person. So, in other words, you get into a kind of an energetic cycle with one person. It goes through its paces from start to finish. You both have grown, you both have developed an astral body of a specific type of energy, and you go your separate ways because there's nothing to do, no more catalyst, no more catalytic activity. And you keep on going, and then as long as you're generating energy of some kind, you're creating a polarity in your own aura, which is ultimately going to attract a suitable energy from somebody else. And these attractions lead to energetic connections and a sharing of energy. It does not need to be physical. It does not need to be sexual. They could be. It could be a platonic relationship. It could be, just a deep friendship. But it's a sharing and it's a bond. And it's sharing of a specific kind of energy, an energy belonging to one of those 7 chakra centers. Concrete spiritual energy, abstract mental energy, concrete mental energy, upper emotional energy, lower emotional energy, physical or sexual energy, etheric energy. Each one of those creates relationships that are totally different. And most of my journey has been following a type of tantric path, which involved more incubus succubus type experiences rather than physical sexual relationships. And I know that one of the highest ones was for example, it was my marriage had just ended. My wife had took my kids. I was in the Air Force. I was going to be getting out of the Air Force because I just couldn't do it. I was struggling with, it was kind of a nervous breakdown, but like the opposite of a nervous breakdown, because for the first time in over 20 years, I was feeling emotions. I was going to see a psychiatrist just to keep tabs that I was doing okay, because there was just so much going on. And I was going to some support groups. And I was going to one of these support groups, and there was a lady there that had I was powerfully attracted to her. And I talked to her one evening. Well, I shared in these support groups, you tell your story. And so I was in front of this group and I told my story, and I was even sobbing, whatever. It was very emotional, powerful. And as in so many groups, support groups, when somebody tells their story, in a way they're telling your story, because you can relate so much to it. And people came up to me after the meeting, and they were shaking my hand or giving me a hug, and saying how much they appreciated the raw emotional honesty that I had shared with them. And this woman came up and reached out a hand to me, and I swear, a spark jumped 2 inches between my hand and her hand. And that energy was just so powerful. And I went home and that energy was going through me and it was doing something inside. And after it was during that night, and I had this dream. It was just an incredibly vivid dream. Well, first it was kind of a sexual dream. It was like with that she was in it, but then there was like a baby with an umbilical cord that was newly born, and it was actually covered with uh, some uh, blood from a birth type of thing. In other words, it's extremely vivid, and I realized that that was me. That was a new astral body for me. That was an energy child that was actually being born for me, and that she had given birth to it because that umbilical cord went to her. And I realized that this is what was meant by all of these things about being born again type of thing, that there's literally a metaphysical basis to some of these things and the way these cycles worked, because I went through 7 of them. This was the first one that I went through, and it was the highest energy and it was the fastest energy. And I only spoke to this woman 2 or 3 times because she was just passing through town. And it only took that time, and it was only just talking to her as that spark that jumped between us that caused this to happen. So that's why I'm saying that we don't even understand when you're talking about romantic relationship, love relationships, whatever. Because what happens is the male gives the energy to the female. She takes that energy and creates with it. And the first thing that she does is balances her own, she creates and balances her own astral body, her soul body, with that specific energy. And once she is complete, she gives birth to an astral child, which the male can then make use of. And then, interesting enough, what you would call the placenta actually is a vision or a timeline of the world in which there's a place created for both of you, not necessarily together as a partnership, but it's a timeline depending on it's a timeline that's created. And variants of that cycle I've gone through at least 7 different times, once for each of the rings on the atom, one for each of the non-physical bodies. And only one of them was really where I married the woman, and it was a truly physical sexual relationship. And one of them, well, a lot of the other ones were purely astral, but in all of them, there was some kind of communication with the person, some kind of sharing that was possible. And what I can say is now, after going through those relationships, there was they all felt that there was always the same. There was a spark, there was a merging of energies, there was both of us growing, and then there was a place where it had a natural ending because there was no place else to go. There was only that one energy. We teach each other. We are teachers of each other. To expect one person to be enough in our lives is extremely rare. It's not going to work that way. What's going to happen is you're going to have several people, and at the end, there's a saying, Dion Fortune talks about it. She says, essentially, when you have all of your astral bodies permanently activated, you do not experience romantic relationships in the same way as somebody else. Because before that, each one of those relationships is kind of a codependent relationship because you need that opposite sex energy. You get it from them. You share it with them. And when you are both perfectly balanced and done, there's no more catalytic effect. You move on and you find something else. And only after all the astral bodies have been permanently activated do you open to the possibility of a totally different type of romantic love relationship that is not based on codependency, but is simply based on equals wanting to share a life together. But in our world, we are so fixed upon the idea that, oh, there's only one person that can make us whole, that can make us complete. And there is not one person that can do that. There's the idea of divine counterparts, and there's a concept of soulmates. I called these cycles soulmate cycles because somehow I was sharing, there was soul development that was taking place. And I also, after all of those were done, the last cycle that I was in was called, it was a divine counterpart experience. Incredibly powerful because it integrated all the other, it repeated and integrated, but on all the levels. And it was actually a very intense relationship with somebody that lived across the world from me. But we were in contact with each other, and the astral or etheric connection between us was so powerful that we could sense each other from across the world away. And we could tell if one of us was having a good day or a bad day, and we could talk about it and share electronically through things like that. So what I'm getting at is there's a hidden metaphysical reality that is involving romantic love relationships, involving this development of permanent activation of various astral bodies, the etheric body, and it's a sacred process. It's not something that one of the things that it requires was purity, which meant you couldn't be involved with 2 or 3 or 4 people at the same time. You could call it a type of serial monogamy in a way. because you were only mixing your energy with this one person that was drawn to you, and you were drawn to her, in my case, uh, through our own personal effort. And we were able to share, in most cases, uh, there was a knowledge of what was going on, but initially, what was happening was the secret that's behind the incubus succubus experience, where she would come to me in a dream, or I would go to her in a dream, and I would have a memory of it, but she wouldn't have a memory of it if I talked to her and asked her about it later. And likewise, because I was connecting with her shadow self, her fears, her angers, her repressed hidden side. She was connecting with my shadow self, which I was not aware of. But as we developed these shadow selves, we both would be, at the final end, we would both be able to meet in astral encounters and be aware of it. But in the beginning, that's not the case. These cycles, I've never read about them before. I never heard about anything like that before, other than references like Aleister Crowley had his Scarlet Woman cycle. Dion Fortune wrote a little bit about some of that stuff. Montauk Chia talks about some of that as from the Asian points of view. What I can say is that these are highly secret teachings that I think just about every valid spiritual tradition that ever existed was aware of on some level, and they kept them highly protected, highly secret. And I just somehow was drawn to those kind of experiences intuitively, I guess, after studying and reading about some being inspired by some various authors like Montauk Chia, for example. So anyway, we teach each other, and we should give each other a little bit of slack, because if you're planning on getting in a relationship with somebody, and you're planning it's going to be a permanent relationship, and it's going to last for your entire life, if you can do that, it's well and good. But a lot of times, in my experience and what I see of others happening, we walk the same path for a ways, and it's a blessing. And then there comes a time where we're teachers for each other, and then there's a time when it might be a time to split. Even my cycle with my divine counterpart was very strange and frustrating in a way, because she is permanently in my heart, and it's like I created two of me, and one of me exists inside of me, and one of me exists inside of her, and she did the same thing. And what seemed to happen at the end of the cycle was like cell division. The circle split into two circles. And it's like the totality of the human soul cannot be confined to one body, cannot be confined to one lifetime. And our souls have evolved through the ages. We've experienced different life forms, different species, different things like that. And properly speaking, when it comes to the divine counterpart aspect, they are everything that we are not. And we are everything that they are not. And so, as I walk upon this world that I call Gaia, my divine counterpart is part of the Gaia. And I can feel her presence all around me, even though we are not physically sharing physical relationships in the same spot of the world at the time. Anyway, I'm just saying that romantic relationships, romantic love, from the perspective of an occultist and a metaphysical position, is totally different than what most people think of it. But it is very beautiful and very magical and very healing and sacred. And to abuse that, to cheapen that, is a terrible thing. Anyway, we'll visit that at some other point. I have written about that, spoken about those cycles a lot more. Just sharing that tonight. Until next time.